everyone. My name is Carmen Wild. I am going to be discussing education in a post-COVID world. Specifically, I would like to inform everyone about the changes that have occurred in education post-COVID-19 and some of the effects that that has on our children and on our communities. I know we all want to forget the year 2020 ever happened. It was a very difficult time. We were bored and isolated with no toilet paper. I still really don't know what that was about. We had remote offices, and many of us, like myself, who are parents, had to resort to homeschooling our children, or at least supplementing their education as they learned virtually. Suddenly, we became teachers. I definitely saw a change in myself. I looked a lot like this during COVID, so you guys can just call me Barbie. But you know, education has always really mattered to me. My mom was an educator. I was a tutor all my high school and college career and in a previous life. And I actually taught both of my daughters, their ages 15 and 11, and I taught them both how to read, and they both score very high, above the 15th percentile in their grade levels and across the state. So it's of great importance to me, but more than that, it's a topic that should interest everyone because it has great effects on the economy. Education is tied to the GDP, property value, and it defines federal and state budgets. So it's something that really is important for our communities, for us to know about. COVID-19 has shown us a decline, steady decline in public school enrollment, higher rates specifically in pre-K and kindergarten. There's an increase in the homeschooling community, parents choosing to keep their children at home and create their own curriculums. That we've seen specifically greater percentages in non-white or minority communities. And that also has long-term effects. We need to study resources that can close the gap of education that has occurred as a result of the COVID-19 world that we are living in today. First, we're going to talk about the public school enrollment decline. We know that we have the data prior that public schools had been showing an increase steadily over the last 15 years. Those numbers post-2020 have been decreased. 20 of the states polled show declines in public school enrollment in the year 2020-2021 academic year. So that's a really important number. The nation's second largest education system in Los Angeles saw a decrease of 11,000 children, specifically in districts and schools that had no remote learning option. There was a 20% decline in enrollment, and we can really assume, because the data is still developing, that the numbers are actually greater than what we're even seeing and able to capture right now. In kindergarten and pre-K, we saw the biggest decrease. Parents choosing to forego pre-K and kindergarten altogether. Actually, I'm going to show some interesting statistic here. Kindergarten enrollment across 60 US school districts showed a 16% average drop. That's a significant number. Typically, we were seeing some parents choosing to opt out of kindergarten, and this statistic is actually interesting because only 17 states and the district and DC actually require full day kindergarten for children. So there's a lot of places where you can get away with having either a smaller portion of the day occupied by kindergarten or foregoing kindergarten altogether. One practice that stands out that has grown significantly is that of redshirting. So a lot of people don't know what that is. Redshirting is delaying the start of school by 1 year for your child. Typically, we saw that 6% of parents prior to COVID-19 were redshirting. Now that number has increased to 12%. This is a practice that was usually adopted by people choosing to keep their children out of school, either for physical development in terms of athletics and giving them a better opportunity to participate at higher levels within their own age group. Also for academic delays or emotional delays. So some people chose to keep their children out. Now we see that 21% of people who opted out of kindergarten did so because of the coronavirus pandemic. The homeschooling percentages are on the rise. We know that there are other contributing factors to this practice of keeping your children out, specifically socialization. So a lot of parents were concerned that how were their children going to socialize? And with all the restrictions, what are the psychological effects of some of that, of some of the new mandates, vaccines and mask mandates that were taking place? Additionally, we saw that parents were confused about whether or not school was going to even occur. Districts didn't know, have a clear timeline of when they would open or if they would reopen or what that reopening would look like. So that had a lot of people decide to keep their children home. And some people were even concerned with rates of infection. So that also played a big role in some of the decision making there. Districts that did open saw a loss of time in education. 80% of parents polled in one school district in Wisconsin reported 80% of those people reported that their children were spending 20 hours per week or less on school, on homework studies. This is a very significant number, and it's important when there's a loss of learning time because it translates to the economy. So we're going to show you some statistics there. A recent study estimates, this is from 2020, that missing just 1/3 of a year of schooling reduces your lifelong earnings potential by 3%. This in turn results in a loss of GDP in present value by $14.2 billion. And if that continues, it actually has the potential to double to $27.9 billion. So it's got some really long-term lasting effects that really we all should be concerned with. So we know that people were keeping their children home from kindergarten, a lot of factors contributing to that, and that districts saw a loss of time of education, a loss of time spent in educating. So what do we do now? What were some of the things that we resorted to? So first, homeschooling. That's a scenario that we know you can have a great rate of success in. So academic performance is better for homeschoolers. We can see here, I'm going to show that data right there. Homeschooled education performance. This is the rise of homeschooling. So this is the percentage. We know that homeschooling had been slowly increasing in number and in percentages, but we now know that there was a big jump in the year 2021. We know we can do it effectively. Parents had this experience of teaching their children at home, and that translated to maybe I can do this long term, especially among lower grades, because you don't need as much specialized learning and the material is easier to comprehend. Curriculums are easily put together. Homeschool education performance outranks traditional school performance by most children. So you can see that there are reports that homeschooled children perform 15 to 30 points above school educated children in standardized testing. And consistently, they show better performance on college placement tests. There can be a greater focus on diversity. So that's another issue that a lot of parents were dealing with. When you look at the Black community specifically, 41% of homeschool families are non-white. And in the Black community, we saw a rise from 3.3% in 2019 to 11.6% in the year 2020 to 2021. So that's a staggering number. Black children typically face harsher discipline than their counterparts, and a greater percentage of being referred to law enforcement than their peers. And lastly, parents can enhance curriculums. They can create specialized history lessons. They can create different community values. And if you're concerned with COVID transmission, you can create a better stable pod. So that was another big point of bringing your children into a homeschooling environment. Now that we know that we can homeschool with high levels of success, we can have a great focus on diversity. What do we do now with that information? And And knowing that there are also going to be budget challenges and higher demands due to low staffing and technology needs, federal funding is determined by enrollment. We know that when there is a loss of enrollment in just 1,300 children, it can result in a district losing $28 million for the following school year. This disparity in funding is of a special concern when you're looking at communities that rely on 70% of federal funding for their education districts. So that those districts that are already taxed, that don't receive funding as high percentage of funding from property tax or property value, are the communities that are most at risk. And that's where we're going to see an even greater gap that already existed and that was already alarming. So what do we need to do? What is the answer? How do we close the education gap? Creating hybrid curriculums has proven to be very, very effective. Districts have allocated technology funds now, and we're doing that before we see the loss of tax revenue. So that's going to be very helpful. We saw in New York, 310,000 iPads were purchased for children that don't have access to a device that provides them with an opportunity to distance learn. So that was one way that we did that. And another thing was providing virtual learning training for teachers that had never had to perform their jobs in this manner before. So that needs funding. Additionally, we know that we have to provide more review materials to these kids because there has been a loss of learning from being home. Teachers are committed to creating lessons plans that do that as well. But the greatest thing is being able to add learning from outside the classroom. This goes for homeschooled and traditionally schooled children alike. The National Homeschool Association is a great community of homeschoolers. You can have a membership for $40 a year. That's for your entire household. They actually have a system that matches you with a curriculum specifically tailored to your educational goals for your family or for your specific child. So that's one way to do that. We know here the public library is a great resource, and public libraries have become a hub for homeschoolers, not only creating groups for the children to socialize in those stable pods that I mentioned, but also where you can have resources that you can pool together to create even more enriched lesson plans. There's been an increase in that, and I think there's going to be even more of that where we can supplement our virtual learners or hybrid learners with our local resources. One of the best things that I found was Amazon Explore. This is something that both homeschoolers, parents, and educators are using alike. It is a service where you can have a virtual trip anywhere. The experiences range anywhere from $10 to $168, and they are amazing. You can have a origami class, you can have Tai Chi, or a host of different activities that you can experience, and for the cost is minimal. So a lot of people are doing that. In short, we know that we've had a decline in public school enrollment. More families are homeschooling, and they're doing so with success. There have been budget challenges, and there will be budgeting challenges for education systems in the future. And there also are resources that we can utilize and that we are utilizing in greater numbers to create these hybrid curriculums to enhance our children's education going forward. And that hopefully will have us all looking a little more like this. Thank you and have a great day.